So the first story that we have this evening is personally actually one of my favorite stories here. As far as obscure ghost stories go, it is one of our more famous ones, if that makes any sense. We like to tell it right here at what we call the signal post, because this is actually the closest spot in the fort you can get to it. It happened just on the other side of Sackville Street in what's now Royal Artillery Park. But at the time of this story, it was just an officers' barracks. In 1782, there were two young officers staying there by the names of Enson Wineyard and Enson Sherbrooke. Enson Wineyard is actually the namesake of this story, as we come to call it the Wineyard story. But these two young officers, they were staying in this barracks, and they were actually there more or less alone. There were a few other people in the barracks, but it was a late night. Being ensigns, they were actually quite young boys, so the rest of the officers, most of them, were out drinking, leaving a very quiet, almost empty barracks. As these two young officers are sitting there in this reading room connected to Mr. Wineyard's room, the door on the other side that connects to the rest of the barracks actually blows wide open. And standing there is this tall, gaunt-faced man. He's wearing tattered hunting clothes. He looks like he's been in some sort of accident, more important than all, but his eyes have also gone pale, just like the rest of his skin. And without a single word, he walks past these two young officers, opens the door to Mr. Wineyard's bedroom, and slams the door behind him, without so much as even acknowledging them. Mr. Sherbrooke, he's offended at this, and he thinks that, well, it would be totally unacceptable to barge into an officer's room like this. So he wants to go and apprehend whoever this was. Given that there's no other exit from the officer's bedroom, aside from the door that they're currently looking at, he knows that whoever this is must still be in there. Ensign Wineyard, however, has a bit of a different reaction. He goes a little pale himself, and he starts pointing at the door, and eventually stammers out. He says, that's not possible. That is my brother Jack. But Jack lives in London. And the problem with, well, him living in London is that London is about 6 weeks away by sail. And also, the harbour, the mouth of it, is encased in ice, which means not only is it too far of a distance for him to have shown up completely unannounced like this, there's also no way for him to actually have gotten into the harbour, given the fact that travel was blocked. So Ensign Sherbrooke, he says, well, obviously, this cannot be your brother Jack. This has to be someone else. There's no other way out of this room. Let's go and apprehend him. And the two rush into Ensign Wineyard's bedroom, and they're immediately met with no one. They don't see anything. And they look around a little more. They check underneath the bed, they open the wardrobe, they search the room, and they still don't find anyone. Next, their attention actually gets drawn to a window in the very back of the room. And they quickly realize that there's no way that they could have escaped, anyone could have escaped through that room either. Because, well, the window itself was puttied in for the winter, preventing it from opening. And then they also look outside and they notice that there are no other footprints on the hill. There's nothing leading away from the window, which means no one could have gotten through this window. Now the two young officers, they look at each other and they decide that, well, they're going to keep this quiet. It's not really a good career move if you go around telling everyone in the regiment that you saw a ghost. They'd end up as the laughing stock of their regiment. So they keep this quiet. However, Ensign Wineyard himself believes that something has happened to his brother. Something dreadful. Now weeks go by, and given that the harbor has been frozen over around the mouth, close to McNabb's Island, no messages have been able to get into the city. Eventually, what they start doing, the ships that are carrying light cargo, such as letters, they pull right up as close as they can to these sheets of ice, and they actually toss their cargo out onto the ice. Soldiers are then sent to go and pick up these letters and bring them into the city, and there's nothing for Mr. Wineyard, not a single letter. More weeks go by, and the same thing happens again. And once more, there is nothing for Mr. Wineyard. And even more weeks go by. A third time, a ship comes in that has some letters for the city. And while there is nothing for Mr. Wineyard yet again this time, there is one letter for Mr. John Sherbrooke. And this letter is actually explaining to him that the Wineyard family would like him to be the one to break this awful news to Mr. Wineyard, that his brother Jack was killed in a hunting accident. And they look at the date on this letter, and it's actually none other than January 6th, which was the exact day that they saw that apparition in what's now Royal Artillery Park here in Halifax.